Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's another episode of the In the Clutch podcast. I'm Jonathan Michael with Clutch Sports Media. Alongside me tonight are my great co-hosts Cody Roskins and Joey Wright. Guys, how's it going? 6 weeks of football are done. Big week 7 on the horizon.
Yeah, John, you hit the nail on the head. It's crazy that we're already two-thirds of the way to the finish line, but we've got a lot left to learn. You look at some big matchups in our area this week. Look no further than Washington Dunlap. Going to learn a lot about those two undefeated, not undefeated, pardon me. Washington did have a close loss early on, but two state-ranked, really good-looking teams with big ambitions. And there are so many of those matchups as we look down the line. A lot to get to this week. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, John, obviously, like Joey said, Dunlap, Washington, the marquee matchup, so to speak. We'll all have our eyes tuned there, but there's plenty of other interesting matchups up and down the lineup this week.
Yeah, certainly. And guys, I mean, really, there's been so many undefeated teams still alive around the area. We'll get a little bit more into that later, but that's for me what's just been so surprising this year is we knew we had some good football teams, but you look around, you got Normal Community still undefeated, Morton Dunlap undefeated. Then you go to the small schools, you got Farmington, Knoxville, Bloomington Central Catholic, and Tri Valley, all still undefeated 6 weeks into the season. I think a good chunk of those teams have a real possibility of going 9-0. So just some real great football teams around the area this year, and plenty of other ones, even ones that have a loss like Washington. I think they may as well be undefeated, but we'll look into this week here in a bit. But guys, real quick, let's recap our games that we broadcasted last week, starting with Pekin and Metamora. It was Metamora's ground attack that just decimated Pekin. Evan Kyle and Jadon Cranford combined for over 300 yards, rushed for 6 touchdowns. Dragons didn't really much have an answer for it.
No, they didn't. And you look at what Cranford and Kyle did, pretty impressive. Pekin's just a little, I mean, point blank, a little down from last year, and that's fair. Last year they might have been the best team in Dragons history, and it was going to be tough to live up to the standard they set. And I think the rest of the Mid-Illini Conference saw that sign, right? They said, "Hey, this is a team that when they dip a little bit, we want to take it to them because they've been doing that to us the last couple of years." So, yeah, it's tough. I was hoping to see a little more from Pekin last week, being that they needed to win to keep their playoff hopes alive, and they've got a favorable draw the next 3 weeks. But a lot of respect for what Doug Nutter's done there and some 15 seasons at Pekin. So you've got to think they'll get back on track. But Metamora, that's a good game to get right, and good showing of what Kyle and Cranford can do for the Redbirds.
Yeah, Joe, just kind of piggybacking off of what you said. We've all kind of seen Metamora in different spots so far this year. John, I know me and you had him during the Washington game. I've been a lot more on the Washington side of the broadcast this year, but it was good to see the Redbirds, like you said, Joey, get right. They know their identity. They're a defensive, run the football, control the line of scrimmage football team, and they did that against Pekin. And when a team hits on 3 out of its 3 phases, they're tough to beat. When a snowball effect gets going downhill like this late in the year, it's just tough to stop. And for Pekin, it's looking the wrong way for the first time in a couple of years. And like you said, that'll happen. I don't think it's any cause for concern. They got a lot of fresh faces and new places, so they'll have some growing pains.
Yeah, certainly. And Metamora, I think, has real opportunity to gain a lot of momentum. We mentioned it on the broadcast on Friday that the Redbirds, their toughest part of the regular season schedule is behind them now. Now they can kind of focus on racking up some wins. I think they'll have a chance to do that for sure the next 2 weeks, and then they have a big showdown, excuse me, with Dunlap in week 9. I think that will be another great test for both teams. But Metamora, I think, probably not going to win the Mid-Illini, but I think they're going to carry a lot of momentum going into the playoffs. And it's a team that has gotten better as the year has gone on. So lots to like there. And then over to our other game, we went out to a Heart of Illinois conference game for the second straight week. We saw Tri Valley at DMAC. Guys, Joey, I know especially you. I know you're a little bit closer to the Tri Valley area down in Champaign, but coming into the season, the Vikings, we maybe expected them to have maybe a little bit of state finals hangover. They had a lot of seniors that left the team last year, and maybe figured that, hey, Tri Valley may not be the favorite, for once in a while. But turns out they put up another good win against DMAC, 28-8, in a game that maybe was a little bit closer than what we were expecting. But Vikings stay undefeated. Chiefs falling 2-4. It's been a little bit of a rough draw for DMAC, dealing with some key injuries.
Yeah, John. Pardon me. Sorry, John. I sneezed while you were asking that question. Can you? I hate to make you. I hate to make you have to edit, but
If you want, Joe, I can go, and then you can just act like you heard
please.
it. Yeah, Joey. John, we kind of all figured Chi Valley would maybe have a step back. And again, DMAC's a team that carries a lot of respect, especially in our kind of inner circle. John, I know you've always loved them, and for all the right reasons, of course. I mean, they play a really solid brand of disciplined football. They're a really easy team to root for, and just when we get to those smaller schools, that kind of consistency is really easy to kind of jump on the wagon with. But yeah, like you said, the Vikings is about as tough as nails, tough as $2 steak, whatever the analogy or synonym you want to really use for it. They're everything and in between. They're the real deal when it comes to the small school football and the landscape. I put them up there, like you said, with the classes of Farmington in terms of just recognizable brand these last handful of years, and they've got a lot of momentum.
Man, you talk about Tri Valley. I'm really excited to see these Class 2A playoffs this year. I mean, you've got some real dogs in that fight. Bloomington Central Catholic, not too far up along I-74. They've got it going this year. You look up and down that Class 2A lineup. It is stacked. It's really going to be a lot of fun to see how everything plays out, assuming that's where they actually get classified in when the playoffs roll around. And DMAC put up a good fight. You know, they've been, I think as Cody said, decimated by injuries. And it's, you hope they can get right and get those players back on the field. Al Britton and the gang as the season goes along. But still, credit Cody Myers and company hanging in there, even without some of their top playmakers on Friday night, and still giving the Vikings a game. But Josh Roop, I mean, just it's coaching. I mean, it's he's built a program. They know the expectation there. I mean, anything short of Memorial Stadium or Hancock Stadium or wherever wherever they're playing state, Husky Stadium is it's a failure. So credit Josh Roop for getting the Vikings ready to play and just taking care of business in that Heart of Illinois conference as they always do.
Yeah, certainly. And if you're a 2A team like Farmington, Knoxville, BCC, Tri Valley is probably not a team that you want to face, but then you got to kind of come to grips with the fact that one of those teams, if they win a game or two in the playoffs, there's a real possibility they'll face up against a very tough Viking squad. So that'll be fun to watch, especially in Class 2A. So, guys, real quick recapping some other action around the area. It was a huge week for blowouts, which obviously we don't really love to see. We like to see in close competitive games, but it's just the way the schedule is shaked out. Not really, at least a lot of competitive games in the Mid-Illini. Washington killed East Peoria 72-8, Morton 57-0 over Limestone, Dunlap 55-0 over Canton. So really, at least not much I took away from those games. The teams that we expected kind of did what we expected of them to do, at least in my mind.
Yeah, huge week last week for Bloomington, and we'll get into the Purple Raiders. They're in our Clutch Sports Media Game of the Week this week against Peoria. But man, taking it to Centennial, going to Tommy Stewart Field, getting the job done on the road. You look at AJ Cadre and Cam Smith. I mean, what that duo has done for the Purple Raiders this year really have the Purple Raiders playing good football. Centennial, pardon me, is a team that we talked about maybe having a chance to win the Big 12 Conference when they played Normal West in Week 9, but no longer. The rest of the Big 12 Conference has stood up since we recorded that episode. They've lost to Danville and Bloomington, and I think the Bloomington squad is going to be one to keep an eye on against Peoria. AJ Cadre, the quarterback, as we'll get into, 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions this season. Cam Smith, their leader at, I believe, 470 rushing yards. So that was a big win going to Centennial and Champaign and getting the job done over the one of the Big 12's premier teams this year in Kyle Jackson's Chargers squad.
Certainly.
Yeah, Joey, sorry, John.
I was going to say, yeah, Joey, not to piggyback too much off of what you said, but when me and John had Peoria High Week 1, who'd have thought, Peoria High would have walked into the blender that is the Big 12 and in the shape that it is right now. Obviously, you got teams running up and down the schedule and all trying to find a scenario where they can maybe inch into that last couple of weeks. But like you said, things changed this last week that maybe we didn't exactly foresee with the Danville matchup. And I don't know. I guess maybe you, John, saw it shaping out differently. I think we both kind of figured Peoria High would kind of just coast on through and maybe wouldn't have as much shakeup from that second team that could really challenge them. But here we are.
Yeah, and speaking of another team that can challenge the Big 12, obviously, I think Norwood Community is probably going to be the Big 12 conference champions. They got definitely some winnable games the rest of the season. They got a clash with PND that I think could get a little interesting, but Ironman looking really good. But talk about a team that can make it interesting and maybe second fiddle to Normal Community right now is Normal West. They're looking good, 54-0 over Manual last week. Elsewhere in the Big 12, you had Community, they beat Danville 42-10. Bloomington, that big win you mentioned, Joey. P&D, they're now playoff eligible at 53-20 after a 53-21 win over Champaign Central. So a year after the Irish go 3-6, lose some tough games, they're already playoff eligible. I think the Irish are going to be looking good this year. Peoria High 76-13 over Richwood, just utter domination from the Lions and Tino Gist return to action. So some big wins certainly in the Big 12. It's a smaller school action. We'll recap that real quick. Princeville won 34-32 in a thriller over South Fulton. Normal U High 73-6 over Joey Wright's Urbana Tigers. And Farmington 28-6 over Macomb. Olympia, a close game with Maroa Forsyth in a game we considered broadcasting. Spartans fell just short. That was a great game down there just west of Bloomington. Eureka wins big over Tremont. IVC falls to Hall 32-24. BCC, that big 35-21 win over St. Joseph Ogden. For me, I think that was one of the most impressive wins of any team in the area. Elmwood Brimfield fell 20-12 to Mercer County. They fell to 1-5. El Paso Ridley wins over Ridgeview. Lexington Fieldcrest falls to GCMS. That's pretty much it. A lot of scores out there all in a row, but guys, any takeaways, any impressions from the games a little bit further away from Peoria and Bloomington?
Well, I look at the Heart of Illinois Conference overall, John. I think that's for my money, the small school conference worth keeping an eye on this year. You've got a lot of teams with interesting stories. I know Leroy's a little out of our area. Again, the 7 home games. Panthers are looking really good. They've yet to lose. They're 6-0. You look at, of course, we just talked about DMAC and Tri-Valley in Eureka and all that the Hornets can do. They've been roughed up a little bit this year, but they'll recover, you'd think, and get things going on the right track as the playoffs approach. So, I mean, I look at any time you've got some Heart of Illinois Conference teams going at it, that's a game worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I guess
just for my money, and we'll get into it when we get into our under the radar games and whatnot, but obviously, Farmington continuing to dominate the regular season like they have for so many years now. And that's always kind of been the question with them, right? Everybody kind of knows the deal with them come the regular season play, but it's different when they get to the postseason and, what their matchups look like. And they're looking to close out a perfect regular season. What do the Farmers have in store for us come, postseason play? Are they going to be a first round, second round exit, or does this team have some legs to it? And I think there's a lot of questions you could really throw that at a multitude of different teams this year, including some of the games we'll touch on, like in Central Illinois. Does Washington, Dunlap, or Morton have the legs to go deep into the playoffs this year? Is there someone that maybe we're missing that kind of can carry the weight for Central Illinois? And I think we're very close to figuring those questions out.
I certainly think
one more thing, John. Oh, I was going to look ahead to week 7, or we can get into that. Again, you're the quarterback here. I'm just keeping the seat warm.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, looking ahead, Peoria Notre Dame and Centennial in Champaign is going to be a really, really important game for both teams. That's one game when we talk about our week 7 slate to keep an eye on. You look at the Chargers. I mean, they've lost 2 in a row. They need this one against a 5-1 Irish team. Centennial, I mean, we were talking about Big 12 title hopes, and now all of a sudden, a tough one against PND this week, a tough one against Normal West in week 9. Decatur Eisenhower in week 8 is a winnable game. The Panthers are 1-5, but I mean, you look at the playoff points.
You got to get at least 2 of them.
Yeah, you got to get at least 2 of them, because I mean, Centennial's got Manual on the schedule. They've got Urbana, Richwoods, Eisenhower, Champaign Central could sneak into the playoffs. Danville could sneak into the playoffs, but one of those teams is going to finish with 4 wins. So, I mean, Centennial's got to be looking at this P&D game like it's a must win.
That's a great
and P&D's 5-1, looking good. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's a great point. I mean, we'll have a lot more playoff scenarios and coverage coming soon and everything. But yeah, I mean, it really certainly helps. Schools that have beefed up schedules. Obviously, for example, when you look in the Mid-Illini, Washington playing Kankakee and Caneland, you had Morton playing Muhammad Seymour and Rochelle. Schedules like that will certainly help you. Even if you lose that game, it doesn't really hurt you as much. Obviously, Centennial, they only play one non-conference game, and obviously just the way their Big 12 schedule shook out. Obviously, they're not really not really facing the best teams around the area. So on the other hand, obviously Centennial not really in our coverage area, but really if your team whatever it may be has played some good opponents, and especially if they've won against them, that's really going to pay dividends here in the next couple of weeks. So guys, real quick, one thing that we learned last week from our slate of games, I just want to pick one thing quick. I don't know if you guys want me to start, but I can. I don't know if you guys have anything that you learned from last week's games.
I'll let Joey
pick first here.
What did I learn from last week's games? Again, it is a little tough spending more time in the Champaign area. I can tell you, I learned really good things about Muhammad Seymour in the Apollo Conference. I know our viewers probably don't care much about the Bulldogs, but they might.
Sees them every year. Morton sees them pretty much every year.
Yeah, Morton, that's become a rivalry. You might care about the Bulldogs when we get to the Class 5A playoffs. We'll term it that way. But I tell you, I continue to learn each week, John, that Morton, speaking of, is legit. I mean, Adam O'Neill coming in, taking over for Tim Briley, and he's got the Potters playing really well. They beat Muhammad in week 1, and that win looks better, with each passing week. And they've still got to get into the heart of their Mid-Illini Conference schedule, but the fact that the Potters continue to look good, I mean, they've got to win against a good Rochelle team. You'll have to refresh my memory on who exactly they played last week, but the Potters are just rolling, and Adam O'Neill coming in. I mean, he was a former Peoria assistant coach and then went and had a lot of success in the state of Kansas, and he's brought that success back to Illinois for sure. So the Potters are legit would be my continued takeaway.
Yeah, Joey,
that's kind of actually where I was going to end up going, so I'll kind of diverge a little bit best I can here. But yeah, I think Morton is just as good as any of the top 3 teams in the conference when they are playing at their A game. Now, that's not to say if Washington and Dunlap are playing their A games, there might not be a little bit of a, still a little bit of distance between them in some spots. But I think Morton has a real shot to notch themselves in as the second best or best team in this conference. Obviously, there's still that 3, clump team at the top, and one of those teams by default will drop this week for their first Mid-Illini loss, and that gives Morton the back door, right? I mean, they would control their own destiny pretty much to the end of the year. And again, it's high school football. Anything can happen. Injuries are a real thing. You get someone with a case of the turnover bug one night, and all of a sudden, the Potters are creeping back in, staring down the Mid-Illini conference once again. But I think outside of that, I think we learned just how competitive the Big 12 conference is. A lot of the final scores, maybe the last even week or 2 or even 3 weeks, kind of looking back, to kind of have you raising some eyebrows. But I think there's a legitimate, cluster of, 4 or 5 teams in there that would give any respectable program more than their fair share any given night.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that I learned is I'm going to kind of focus in on a certain town that's had a lot more success than normal. No pun intended. I'm not talking about normal. I'm talking about their town right next door. I'm talking about Bloomington. They have some great football teams this year. Purple Raiders pick up a big win over Centennial, 34-20. They're now on the doorstep of playoff eligibility, and Scott Godfrey's team has really been looking for that playoff berth. They've been knocking on the door, been so close the last couple of years, and just haven't quite been there. Lots of 4-5, 3-6 seasons. Now they're 4-2 at the moment. A tough game against Peoria High, but then they end with games. I know they play MacArthur one weekend. I believe also play Champaign Central. I think both those games could be close, but I think they're winnable for Bloomington. And obviously Central Catholic undefeated right now. A huge win against SJO, who was 5-1. That win I'm not going to say have locked it up, but is, put the Saints obviously in control of their own destiny atop the Illini Prairie Conference. That's such a hard conference. You got, Tolono Unity, who's always great. You got Prairie Central, who's always great. You got Monticello, who's really good. Paxton Buckley Loda, who's really good. And obviously St. Joseph Ogden as well. And then you had BCC in the mix. That's 6 outstanding football teams in that conference. And whoever, goes atop is, truthfully a very, very good football team. And right now it's BCC. So a lot of momentum for the Saints. So kind of switching it over now, looking forward to this week. Guys, it's one that I'm really excited for. A lot of good games on the slate. We'll get more into our biggest games to watch later, the ones that we're broadcasting. But let's start first with an under-the-radar game to watch this week. Cody, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, you can call me a cop-out if you want. I kind of hinted at it earlier. But with all the eyes on Dunlap, Washington this week and some big games in the Big 12, I went with Old Reliable with Farmington. They're 6-0, looking to close out a perfect regular season, John. And again, this has always been the toughest question with I guess media with the Farmers, right? Is because they know they're usually going to run the table, maybe drop a game in the regular season. But what do they look like come postseason time? Well, they're going to get a good test when they go to 5-1 at Weathersfield and Annawan. I hope I said that right. But that's not going to be an easy road trip. When you get this late in the year, teams typically know exactly what you're all about. There's not a whole lot more you can really fool. Not more surprises up the sleeve here. That's going to be a really good game. I think if the Farmers are able to pull that one out, it really sets the kind of table for them, so to speak, because they're probably going to have to travel a decent distance come the playoffs, depending on what kind of matchup they would get. But I think with the way their schedule kind of opened up, they've had a couple of 2-hour, hour-and-a-half caliber road trips this year to really kind of get their feet wet, so to speak, in that department.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one to keep an eye on, Cody. By the way, John, I want to sneak in a quick point on BCC. They play Illinois Valley Central this week. That won't be probably a very good game in all likelihood, but was not all that long ago. I mean, you look at that program, 4 state titles. The Saints are a perennial powerhouse. Not all that long ago, they were 0-9 in 2018, though. Fell on a little bit of a hard stretch there. So perhaps that's hope for the Illinois Valley Centrals of the world this year, that they can get back and brighter days are ahead. But, I mean, you look at under-the-radar games, Eureka and El Paso Gridley. That, when we look at my Heart of Illinois conference, I mentioned earlier, that is going to be a really good game. 2 4-2 teams. You think both teams will make it into the playoffs, but you never know. I mean, with 3 games left, so you've got the chance to become playoff eligible on the line. I know you guys have seen these teams a little more than I have this year. That'll be a home game for Eureka. But 2 4-2 teams that have handled the conference slate pretty well so far. Looking at Eureka, their lone setbacks against Shelbyville, really good Shelbyville team this year, and Gibson City Melvin Sibley. Well, the Falcons are 5-1, and then looking at what El Paso Gridley has done this season, they lost Declan Dooley, who's now punting at Illinois and kicking at Illinois, but only losses to Tri-Valley and that aforementioned GCMS team this year too. So that's going to be a really good one in the HOIC. Looking forward to seeing how that all plays out in Eureka.
Yeah, I certainly think so. I think the winner of that game is probably going to be the most probable, challenger to Tri-Valley atop the HOI. I know, obviously, I think the Vikings are, certainly the favorite right now, but if it's going to be another team in the mix, it's going to be the winner of that El Paso Gridley Eureka game. When we were picking those for our CSN pick'ems this week, that was almost a coin flip game. It was going to be really fun to watch. My under the radar game to watch this week, I actually had, a couple of them lined up. Joey, you took my El Paso Gridley Eureka one. Cody, another good pick as well. I'm going first with UI and Glenwood. The Pioneers, they're 5-1 at the moment. They've already locked up playoff eligibility, which is huge for that program. They were on a streak of not making the playoffs for quite some time, and now they've kind of broken those chains. A big week against Glenwood, who's I believe is 4-2. They're coming off 2 losses to MacArthur and Sacred Heart Griffin, but both by 1 score. I think that was going to be a great game down in the Central State 8 Conference. Although I have to give an honorable mention to Stark County and Princeville. That's a big rivalry matchup that probably not a lot of people around the Peoria area know about. And Stark County is undefeated at 6-0. Princeville is 4-2. They're starting to get some guys back from injury. They had their starting quarterback Logan Carruthers out for a bit. They had dynamic running back Tayshawn Keyser out for a bit. And looking at their box score from last week, it looks like both players are at least back for at least for the most part. So that should be a great game to watch up in Princeville. So, guys, real quick, another segment that we had planned was, just real quick, pick a burning question that either you can answer or you think needs to be answered by a certain team by the end of the regular season.
Joey, I'm going to default
to you going first again. I gotta have one more second to think about mine.
Man, well, hey, I've got Stark County on the mind, John. You mentioned Stark County, and what a
Who does it?
Well, I mean, and they're a little. I forget that, honestly, I'm gonna have to think of a different question because they are just a little beyond our borders. But easy to forget because they were our first ever game. Larry Larson and I going out to Farmington in 2019. A question I would have would be for, I think I'll go Dunlap. Sorry, Eagles, haven't really been tested this season. Good team, obviously. They'll factor into the Mid-Illini race. I would expect they'll be very competitive here these next couple of weeks of the season. My question would be, can you hang with a Washington team that's been ranked in Class 6A all year? Dunlap is ranked 2 in Class 5A, but they're a relatively new player to the polls compared to the Panthers, anyways. So I guess that'd be my question. Pardon me, John. We'll have to wait on Friday for an answer. But are the Eagles legit? Can they hang? And I know they've listened to this podcast before and found some motivation from some things we've said about them. So I mean that in a good way. I'm excited to see what they can do this week. I think they'll be competitive. It should be a great game on Friday night. I think Brett Caslett will have those boys ready to play.
Yeah, Joey.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, I guess it's kind of easy to go at the Washington Dunlap games. I'm just kind of sitting here thinking, well, we kind of touched on Morton already. Can they kind of sneak in the back door depending on the result? Let's say, hypothetically speaking, Dunlap were to win Friday and Washington were to drop its first conference game. Well, then you look at Morton to where their path to a conference title becomes a whole heck of a lot easier because they would own the half game edge going into whatever matchup they would have with Washington. And kind of, again, same thing with Dunlap. What is the realistic round robin scenario out of those teams? Is there a team that just comes out and you think, okay, we'll win both, and then it's up to that team in second to beat the other later in the season? To me, is there a way for Morton to kind of creep in the back door to that second spot or first spot? I think is the first overall question I've got in my mind, just because it is the big bread and butter thing for us at CSM is the Mid-Illini. And I think if you go outside of that, is just where does everybody fall in the Big 12? Because we've touched on it. There's so many different scenarios. P&D all of a sudden's caught fire, and where do they really sit in the mix of things? And come postseason time, where do these teams really slot in? And do they get many favorable matchups because they've been beaten up on each other for so long?
Sorry about that, Cody. I had an errant Max Preps window play that audio. I don't know if that got picked up. That's my fault.
Hey,
all good, but
I would those Max Preps videos will get you. I had it happen to me actually, believe it or not, earlier today. But yeah, no, those are great points, guys. And Joey, you thankfully I came up with a backup burden question because you took mine. I think Dunlap, obviously the big question was them is they're 6-0, but they've looked really good. They're beating teams by some wide margins. But I really think that slightly younger Eagles squad will definitely get tested against a little bit of a more experienced Washington team this week. My burning question I think needs to be answered is in the Big 12, specifically with Normal West, a team that I have not seen in person yet this year, but obviously been following along and saw a little bit of them against Normal Community back when we did that game back in week 3. Is can they develop a strong ground game? The Wildcats, they have their passing game has been great. They have a bunch of talented wide receivers: Gavin Camp, Malik Givens, Michael Williams, and they've been passing the ball really well. Now, if they can develop a strong ground game on top of pretty solid defense, I think the Wildcats, can probably make a deeper run in the postseason than many people expect. Obviously, last year they ran into the buzzsaw that's East St. Louis in Class 6A. I'm sure the Wildcats and many other people are hoping that doesn't happen again. That's a really tough draw going up against the Flyers, but I think the Wildcats certainly have the potential if they can get some stuff going on the ground. So real quick, guys, only have a couple minutes left. Our games this week: Washington Dunlap. We've hashed over that a little bit, and Peoria High and Bloomington. real quick, what do you guys expect out of Washington Dunlap?
I guess I'll mix it up, Joey. I'll go first this time since I've thrown you under there a couple times.
Please.
John, when we made our picks today for that game, obviously I'm just getting back into town from some out of state family stuff, but able to kind of still get my picks in. I was looking at the Panthers. I think Dale Crouch, his guys will be motivated. They'll win one more for him. I think it'll be a really close competitive game. They'll look for the Washington defensive line and Dunlap offensive line to be the difference in that one.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's now Cody taking the words out of my mouth. It'll be closely contested. Washington's faced a few more challenges this season, but Dunlap, you can only play the teams in front of you, and they've looked really good this season. I remember a game Larry Larson and I did. It was 2019, Week 8. The Eagles played Canton with a chance. The Mid-Illini Conference title, I believe, was on the line, and they needed to win, and they did, and it was close. It was really close. It came down to them stopping a Canton 2-point conversion late kind of game. I'm going to give I don't know if I can pick a winner, but I would expect it to be that same kind of game. Whoever's on the call for that one, John, I think you're out there. Be ready to bring your A game late in the game because I think you're going to need it. It's going to come down to a late play.
No kidding. I think it's going to be a great game. I was super stoked to have the call with Gavin Russell for that one. I think that game is really going to come down to defense. Both of them have been stellar this year. Washington's defense, we've talked about many times in the podcast, has been great. But Dunlap is honestly right up there as well. They've actually allowed the least amount of points of anybody in the entire conference so far this year. I think they're averaging, probably well under allowed 10 points per game allowed. So don't sleep on Dunlap's defense either. I think that the Eagles defense can keep them in it for sure. And real quick, guys, Peoria High and Bloomington. At least the first time I think since I've been a member of Clutch Sports Media, which that began, I want to say, in the fall of 2020. It's the first time we've ever done a football game at Bloomington. Maybe the first time in company history. We'll have coverage of that on ClutchSportsIL.com. I'm really excited to see that game between the Lions and the Purple Raiders.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say they have a beautiful field. I think Peoria will win. I think it'll be close. I think Peoria's offense just gets up and down too well. They've been up and down a little this season. I think they'll have a little too much for the Purple Raiders. But if the Purple Raiders can hang around, AJ Cadron and Cam Smith going to be a big showing for those two. So a beautiful facility. It'll look great on our camera.
Yeah, I saw the timer clicking down the left. We're going to have to play the 15 seconds or less with the 90 seconds we have remaining. Lions will roar. Peoria High, I feel like we'll get it done on. That's just a good offensive football team. Obviously, their defense at times has been hit a little bit. So, again, look for Bloomington to give them a heck of a game.
Yeah, I certainly think so. And, obviously, there's no questions really about Peoria High's offense, especially with Tino Gist or even, when Breon Greens had to come in the game, whether that was in the middle of the season or whatever, or, with Peoria High's leading by just a ton of points there, bringing Green like they did last week, they're still going to be fine. They're going to roll. The really question for Peoria High is their defense. If AJ Cadron, Cam Smith, and then they also have some great wideouts in Keontae Hamilton, Garrett Dickerson, Bloomington does. Keep an eye on that. If Bloomington can put up some points and make it a track meet, I think they can hang around in that game. It really should be fun to watch on ClutchSportsIL.com. Washington Dunlap on CIProud.com. It should be a great week of football. That about does it for this episode of the In the Clutch podcast. I'm Jonathan Michael alongside Cody Roskins and Joey Wright. We'll talk to you next week here on the In the Clutch podcast. See you on Friday night.